Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Network Automagic Show, Episode 3. We're joined here by our very special guest, Marco Martinez, and the other mind behind Nuts, Urs, who happens to be my co-host. This isn't the lazy episode that we're trying to squeeze in the last minute and just, find filler, because we don't want to do real work. No, this is actually important, so I will be damned if anyone tries to imply that. Now, Marco, welcome to the show. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself before we start talking about your nuts? That's the last time we used that innuendo.
Very nice. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm Marco. I'm one of the core maintainer of Nuts. Have been working on it for a couple of years. I have done some network testing talks as well, which we will surely go on about it. And I'm very passionate about networks.
Fantastic to hear. And Urs, if people don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself as well.
Oh, about me? I'm just a lazy guy who automates everything he can. So nothing about me to say.
Exactly. He's a man of mystery, folks. This should increase viewer and listener engagement. Yes. Now, Nuts, the network unit testing system, right? Think pyTest, but for networks. All right. Which we'll get into. So can you tell us a little bit about what is Nuts for anyone who doesn't know?
Yeah, sure. Nuts was built in mind that we need to test our systems. We have a lot of value in our network. We shouldn't push to production networks. So what we're trying to do is build an automated system that does all the checks for us. We know we old school engineers used to just ping stuff and would be like, that seems to be fine. Everything surely works. The next day we get a call and they're like, dude, nothing works. And I'm like, no, not again. That's going to be a rough week. So we built Nuts with the intention in mind. We have a big network. We cannot test everything. Let's just do it automatic. Let's just let the tool do the stuff for us. So Nuts is structured in a few different components. We have our testing definitions where we can easily in YAML write our stuff, just define what needs to be tested, and Nuts basically does the rest for us. It gets us the results, it checks all the devices, just handy and neat, like we like it.
All right. So, coming from a legacy background, usually, half the time when everything's running fine, you trust the old SNMP, we got everything looking green, but you want to go beyond that, I assume. You want specific tests and expected results. So, was there a particular incident or pain point that pushed you to, did you need to, manage ping in a certain way, or was it a routing table entry? What drove this?
Usually when you go on, you do some config checks. You're like, oh, do I have all my security features still in the config, whatever. But Nuts really goes a step further than that. It automatically checks your stuff. It can ping from different VRFs. It can check the routing table. It can check how many BGP neighbors you have. And these kind of stuff can be really essential. And sometimes you just forget to test something. Do you check a VRF that you never touched before? Do you check if the ping is still working, if the DHCP is still working, or whatever? Usually you don't. But sometimes you just want to get in the real network and you just want to test all the things you need. So what's going on is you say, Nuts, can you please check if everything is still fine? You do some DNS checks, you do some ping checks, you do whatever, and it just reports to you what is broken and what might not be broken, what still works, what is still fine.
Yeah, very well said. I think Nuts was 2016 or 17, the first version. And actually at this time I was working at the institute at the university, and we had this shadow IT, and we had this playground network, let's say. And at this time we had to change a lot of stuff, and we were thinking let's be bold. We would just replace the whole core and the firewall stack and all the rules at the same time. Because what can happen, right? Maybe 10 people cannot work, but who cares? We anyway have to fix it then. So we did this funny change, and at 4 a.m. because it was not so smooth as we hoped, surprisingly. We ended up to say, we did some tests, of course, but there were so many VRFs, so many helpers we had to check. We just said, yeah, let's hope for the best. And surprisingly, everything worked the next 1 week. But after 1 week, the first VoIP phone stopped working. And we were like, what is happening now? And then the second one. So in the end,
somebody's DHCP started expiring, huh?
Exactly. But the funny point was, from, I think it was around 15 networks, only one lost the IP address helper. And we were thinking, like, how should we have checked this? We need some tooling around this. So yeah, that was the first spark that led to all of this.
So when it comes to like the test bundles that's offered, like we're going to dive into, you know, compatibility issues and that type of thing. But, you know, to really sell people on the use case that are listening to this in the car right now, I'm just going to rattle off some of the test methods. And the thing is that you were able to build this on top of existing tooling, so Nornir, Napalm drivers, etc. Like it is a jungle out there. Like it is a real pain to be multi-vendor, and you know, you have different interfaces, and you know, I'm sure you get beat up at the conference occasionally for, oh, why did you use this library? Why did you not use this library? And then you could have been blah blah compliant, and it's like, dude, we have to support like bling bling 9000 devices that are, you know, from a vendor that went under 30 years ago. Like all we have is Telnet on it. Like, okay, cool. But I'm gonna rattle off some of the test bundles just from the website. I mean, we got the ARP table, so you know, we got some ARP tests. Does it exist? Is your stuff still there from before? Which is always a great thing. We got BGP neighbor count, as you said. We got CDP, so Cisco Discovery Protocol neighbor counts, which is great to know if the switch is still online or if a link has changed or whatever. So the counts are pretty handy. Now, this would probably go down from... These are overlapping with some of your traditional monitoring things like the SNMP checker and all that stuff, but this allows you, of course, to run it immediately after you do the change and, you know, get that fast reactive rollback going if you're inclined to do that. So I'm looking at configuration, startup versus running. We got interface stuff. We also have iPerf, which is very interesting. So I assume that's more for the Linux boxes or wherever you get the console. We got LLDP, of course, similar to the Cisco proprietary one. We got neighbor instances on the OSPF. You always want to you want to check that area. You want to make sure that everyone's happy in the OSPF area. We got pings. We got VLANs. We got user information. So no, your rogue user stuff. That's very interesting. Extending beyond that, because you're using existing infrastructure. If you wanted to test, let's say, you know, ISIS or something like that, how difficult is that to implement if it's not part of the standard bundles that come out of the box?
I guess depends. Usually what you can do is write your custom test. Is not that big of a work to do, but it always depends on what device. So if you have a nice API, you can do it in a couple of minutes, maybe a couple of hours. If you don't have a nice API, you start CLI scraping, you have 10 different devices you want to support, it can get a little annoying. But in general, it's built on the PyTest, on the Python testing library. So it's very easy. Everything is handled for you. Mostly you just need to write where to get the information and what to do with the information. So as long as you can do that, should be very easy.
So part of like a deployment workflow that you might have, let's say, you know, you have a very static and large environment like the ones that you were describing, and it sounded like you were about to do a massive change, but you know how your day-to-day network looks like. In the MSP space, or, you know, if you're doing ad hoc stuff, that might be a little bit harder because, of course, you have to know what you're going to be looking for pre and post change. Like, is there anything else that complements working with nuts? Like, is there some other framework that you can jack into, or, you know, what would you recommend as a fun stack for people to look at that we're going to do config changes and then post testing?
Yeah. So there's actually a nice talk from me about this. it was at Swinock 39. So I built a custom workflow. I call it the INPG Stack, where you can get all your devices from Infrahub. Then what Infrahub does is it generates all the testing definitions for you. So everything that you have in there based on the properties you have from the devices. If you have IP addresses, it will do a ping to that. If you have neighbors, you can do ARP, you can do CDP, LLDP. Based on the device, it will check if it's LLDP or CDP. It will generate all the tests for you yourself, so you get a nice baseline of testing. That one will then be handled by Nuts. So Nuts will test your whole entire network. And even as a little bonus, it will push it to Prometheus, and Grafana will visualize it very nicely for you. So you got this nice graph, and you can see if you can run your tests like once every few hours or every few minutes. And you can see nicely if your network is going through changes and some of the tests are failing. So what you get is you get a real-time view of your network, and you get the assurance if it's working or not.
So that's very useful. When it comes to like pre and post change information, I mean, it's up to the user, or in this case, Infrahub, to supply you with the pre-state, and then of course you're expected to know yourself the post-state. We're withdrawing this BGP neighbor. We're not going to be shocked that he's gone afterwards, but we also want to test that he is gone from everywhere. So, finding out stuff that perhaps is, and that of course allows you to play with the assertion mechanism inside of pytest. You're testing what is and what is not is also just as important. Like you should not have 3,000 admin users on every single box with the password quick Russian access 123. That would be bad. So, checking your user counts, making sure that your static users, your AAA configuration is still there, all that good stuff. But yeah, so we started talking about some of the internals under the hood. You mentioned, of course, it jacks into pytest. What else are we looking at here? Is it people are going to need to know YAML. That's gonna be a standard part. Is there anything else that people need to be any other project that they need to be familiar with before they get started with Nuts?
Yeah. So the basic thing is we targeted old school engineers in particular when we built it. So the only thing you really need to know to use the basic test is YAML, and YAML is very nicely to read stuff, and also to write is not that difficult. So you can just go ahead from there. You select the test you want to do, and you just put in the information you need. The nice and neat thing is Nuts works with Nornir, so you can get the inventory very nicely as a Nornir inventory. You don't need to put in all in a static file. You can, of course, do that, but you can also check into Infrahub or to Netbox directly and get all the information you need. So if you want to do a test, you can just say, like, get me all the Cisco devices I have, and then you can test them. So you get this nice inventory of Nornir, and also that you don't need to know the specifics of Nornir in this particular case, because you just need to write the YAML and it will do all the things for yourself. But if you go a little further into that and you want to write your custom tests, you can use, or you can even supply your own Nornir inventory. You can write a plugin into Nornir and get your own inventory going. And if you write some custom tests, of course, you should know a little bit of Python. Otherwise, it will probably be a little hard to write them, but you can get going like really fast about it.
Yeah, maybe our lovely listener are now asking, why did you choose YAML? So I can say something about that. The idea was really to have it easy to consume, and the separation between, we have more skilled engineers who can write the test definitions, the test implementations, and we can have, for example, also field engineers who can use the YAMLs. So if they exactly know how to do it, they could do it. But if we are talking about automation nowadays, of course, we want to generate most of our tests, probably. But at least it is easy to use, to consume, and YAML allows us this separation from Python code and just the using of the test cases.
Fantastic. So we mentioned some sources for the inventory. For the listener who's not familiar with Nornir, we can jack into Netbox, we can jack into Infrahub. We can, not about anything else. The user, if you had to sell the user on the Nornir ecosystem, anything you'd like to tell the listener?
Yeah, I mean, it works pretty nicely. I think it's also very common. Like a lot of the engineers will already be kind of familiar with Nornir. So I guess it's a little bit of an obvious tool to choose for the inventory mechanism and like all the things you do. So I think it's mostly the familiarity, and also the support is kind of nice you get from it. So we don't need to invent everything ourselves. If we can have something that takes care of the needed things for us, it's pretty nice.
Fantastic. Now, when it comes to the testing philosophy, what makes a good nuts test and what makes a bad nut test?
Yeah. I guess usually testing, you want to test everything you can. But in the real world, testing everything you can lead to performance issues. So sometimes you need to prioritize. Also, is it useful if you test your entire network all the time? Yes, it is. But it can also lead to performance issues if you do it too frequently. So I would kind of be cautious of doing like iPerf performance test. Is my 1 gigabit still going? Maybe do that at night if you don't have too much traffic. Or yeah, don't do it every 5 minutes because it's not gonna change. So yeah, I would get a nice baseline of testing, but I wouldn't overdo it in the first step, and then kind of see that you're not creating problems and crashing machines or whatever. It is nice to use from time to time, but it's also very nice when you do changes. So maybe the time to time thing is a different use case than when you do changes. When you do changes, you probably want to test everything. When you test from time to time, it sometimes is just sufficient if you just test something.
Yes, definitely, I agree on that. PyTest, for example, also allows us to use folder structure to sort which tests we want to run, so we can organize our tests. One thing that I would keep in mind is run your test before and after the change. So think about what would you want really to know that this is still there. You talked about the OSPF neighbors. We want to be sure that we have not one, we have two OSPF neighbors before we make the change on the system on the other side, maybe. So yeah, I would also include tests with this test counts as we see. So OSPF neighbor test count also would give us information that we have maybe too many neighbors. That would be also weird, right? So yeah, think about, in one way you can think about the old days. You had the checklist, right? We all were really prepared for all the changes we did. So we can use this checklist kind of thing. But yeah, in the end, think what is actually needed. And yeah, there is definitely a thin line between monitoring and testing at some point.
Which sounds like an interesting use case for the user. Now, I just want to, do some fear and inject some FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt into the listener's ear right now. So, the reason why you would like to have one of these things is not as your day-to-day SNMP monitoring or streaming telemetry setup. You want this for your software upgrades, for example. Now, let's say that you have a big old BGP network and you got that route reflector. You got one or two of them. You're upgrading to the latest and greatest version from the big C vendor or big J vendor. Doesn't matter which vendor it's from. And let me tell you, my friend, you're going to hit a bug eventually. And you might hit a really bad bug. And you might not be aware that you lost every BGP neighbor that has an even ending IP address for some reason, or something horrible happens. And what you want to do is have something really fast that rolls back or, takes it offline, so the one that you haven't upgraded just keeps running. So you don't want him to take it over. Not that that has ever happened to anyone I ever know, or, I've never heard that story before. So pre and post upgrades, because you're going to be doing a lot of security patching, especially No offense to our Fortinet friends, but if you're doing Fortinet, you're going to be patching a lot, and something might break, and you're going to want to, when you're drilling in that umpteenth security patch this week, again, lovely product, lovely people, but they are patching. At least they're patching. Great guys, and you should be patching too. So when you're drilling in those patches, you're gonna want those pre and post changes, and you're gonna sleep a lot better at night because, hey, maybe that OSPF neighbor isn't coming up, and you're not going to know until the next day when somebody calls you super angrily, or you're managing those tests by hand, in which case you're going around doing show commands, or you have your ping script, which is great. But now you can put your ping script into a standardized format. You can add and remove from using an inventory system or a network source of truth like Netbox, Infrahub, Autobot, etc. It's going to be a lot nicer for you, moving forward, and not having to, manually have a notepad document that hey, I used to do TCL scripts on my Cisco boxes back in the day, pre and post checks, but this is a lot nicer, and you're going to be able to run it as part of a CI/CD system, for example. So if you've if you're moving to Terraform or doing changes like that, you're going to be able to run that after you run your Terraform code. Great, make those changes to the environment. That looks great, but Terraform's not going to care if you have that neighbor or not. It's just going to configure the interface to have the IP. It does not care if there's a neighbor on the other end of that link you just configured. So by having this run at the end of it, again, we're really spelling this out just because, you can send this podcast episode to your manager, and we'll explain why you need to, set up nuts in your network, and why you need 2 weeks of training and going to AutoCon 3 in Prague, where you're going to learn all about it. Which reminds me, Urs, where can people learn more about nuts?
Definitely at the workshop at AutoCon 3 on Monday at 9 a.m. And on the internet, of course.
It's on the internet.
Internet is great.
The internet is great, right? And after the workshop, the plan is to get a version of the whole workshop set up online, so you can use GitHub code spaces, spin up a couple of those fancy Nokia container spin up that container lab just all in the cloud, one-click wonder stuff, and then you can start to play with your nuts and play with each other's nuts. You can share your nuts with other people. I'm so sorry we keep doing this joke, but you picked the name, not me.
I love the name. I think that's something of the greatest thing that was in this project. And as you said, definitely the goal is after the workshop to openly show all the people the nuts that we are playing with.
So is there anything, you'd recommend, especially we've talked a little bit about the use cases, some war stories, like, that the IP helper's gone away. You're not able to test the DSCP without, making sure that the helper addresses are there and all that good stuff. Anything, you'd recommend the listener to get started besides, go to the website and all that? What is like the easiest use case? Is it just, make sure that ping is, get that ping working? Make sure that you can ping from your inventory?
I would say so. Definitely spin up a container lab, spin up a VM with the nuts on it, and just play with it, I guess. Do a ping, get it working, maybe work yourself to a second test case, and then you're good to go.
That sounds pretty great. Now, I was playing with the inventory files, and I spun it up, and of course, we don't have the language server stuff yet, so I was just crying last night to Urs, like, Urs, I need to go, like, the connection option, and then it's Napalm, and like, how do I spell, do I put an underscore on the iOS XR, or like, what do I do, Urs, what do I do? And he was like, you read the manual, and I didn't find it in the manual. So, like, that brings us to the road ahead. Like, this is an evolving project. That there's stuff to do. People might be able to help. What does the road forward look like? What features are you looking to add? What's going on with that?
We're definitely trying to add new features. Of course, our time is limited, so we always are happy to get some contributors. Also, we would be happy to discuss all the features you need or want or desire on LinkedIn or on GitHub discussions. Whatever, just get the nuts going. Well, our next features will probably be that we want to support the newer Python versions. That was kind of a problem in the past because we had some dependencies that didn't support it yet. And we'll probably also upgrade to the newest pyTest in the near future.
Okay, fantastic. So that's coming up. Let's talk a little bit about your tooling ecosystem. Anything you'd recommend to the listener, if they have a blank VS Code install, and, we've already mentioned GitHub code spaces and Container Lab being great. Is there anything else, any packages or anything like that you'd highly recommend to users?
I guess just start your journey with it. You will figure it out along. Maybe some language servers are nice, so you get this nice formatting, and maybe you get some suggestions. You can do it all in GitHub code spaces. You can also definitely do it on your own computer. Depends on what you want to do. Maybe also get your hands dirty and maybe do a custom test and get a real feel for it. Of course, it requires a little bit of Python, but it's all pretty simple stuff.
Maybe one thing to add, I highly recommend to use it on a Unix system. So if you're a Windows guy, at least use WSL or a VM or CodeSpaces, because Napalm and all the communication, it saves you a lot of trouble if you start directly with the real OS for network automation.
A real OS, like the gauntlet has been thrown down. Sorry, Windows weenies. I know the corporate enforcement policy wants you to run that Windows box, but Earth says that when cats used to be cats and dogs used to be dogs, they ran their Unix-based systems and they had their bash shells and they didn't use the fancy Z shell. No, we piped everything.
Yeah, maybe disclaimer: I have 4 notebooks. They're all running Windows.
Gross, dude. Gross. Yeah. Set up that Minecraft server somewhere else, buddy. Now, listeners know where to go. They know who it's for. They have some ideas of some of the values of the pre and post change checks and that sort of thing. You go to the read the docs is, of course, populated with some examples and that sort of thing. Anything else that you think we forgot to mention to the listener, that they should know before setting off on their journey?
Yeah, definitely give the GitHub repo a star. That is a very important thing to do. Shows us some support, and also if you use it in the real life, let us know. We're always happy to hear some feedback, to see what the nuts is doing wrong in your network, because surely it would have done something wrong.
Yeah, I think that's one thing of the hard part when you have open source projects. You have no idea who is using it. So we saw some blog posts popping up. They are also in the README in the lower section if you want to read some more stuff. There are also the videos we know about are linked there. Definitely would be nice to have some feedback who uses it. We definitely use it in different projects. We know what some people are playing with our nuts, but feedback, the GitHub stars, and one idea that is still in the mind is to have more collections of test cases. Like the GitHub, we have our own organization, and the idea is to have a repository with Linux checks, one with open config checks probably, because we don't like screenscaping, definitely. So it's a trade-off between having too much dependency in one project and divide it in multiple repository. That's definitely a point that we would love to have some more ideas and input.
So, I think we would be remiss if we didn't do a little bit of bookkeeping around just, which components is which. So the Napalm versus NetMiko versus Scrapely situation, because you're going to hear a lot of talk about these, especially because you're using them as kind of they're raw connectors. You use them to connect to devices using Python. They're Python libraries for connecting to devices. Now, NetMiko supports around 105 devices plus minus something last time I checked, right? It does not have config management, right? It doesn't have getters, but it does have Nornir support. We have Scrapely. Now those guys have like 5 or like they list a lot less stuff. But there's config management via Scrapely CLI, and there's getters. Like you can if you're writing these raw tests on your own, you can there's like 2 getters or 3 getters or something like that. Like it's really really low, but it does also have Nornir support. And again, the third one, Napalm. So Urs told me last night, like, ja, Steinsy, there's only like 5 devices supported natively by Napalm by default, and I was like, yeah, I have all those devices. Those are my standard vendors. I'm a lame guy, so I didn't even know about the community. He snuck in a little install, for the what's the Nokia OS called again?
SR Linux.
SR Linux. Like there's a little tiny bit in his startup test script. Like, oh yes, I'm going to install this community thing, and there's a lot of those, but as you said last night, Urs, like when we were prepping, like you have no idea what the state of that particular Napalm driver like is. Like the maintainer could have died in COVID and you wouldn't know. Like, and until it's too late, and then you become the maintainer because you're way down the rabbit hole. Welcome to open source. So it's Napalm, NatMiko, Scrapely. What other are there any other connectors that Nornir is using?
There would be netconf, right? There would be GNMI. I think there are also some proprietary APIs for I think F5 and all this stuff. So there's a nice list of plugins from Nornir. At the moment, it's still on nornir.tech, but this will change soon. Definitely, if you are not familiar with the ecosystem of Nornir, check out this plugin list. There's also one plugin we introduced for caching because we had some performance issues with nuts. So there is this nuts caching. If we want to make the same show commands, we don't do it twice on the box, for example.
Oh,
that's also a hidden gem.
That's a hidden gem right there. I mean, nobody likes it when you start DDoSing your management plane in the middle of the night because you're going like, I want to see if the neighbors are up. I want to see if the neighbors are up. I want to see if the neighbors are up every 40 milliseconds. By the way, is there like a way, do you have to handle clearing the cache yourself, or do you just do some magic in the background? Like, how do I know that I just got new stuff or am reading the cache stuff?
By default, we use the pytest cache, and by default, for each run we start the cache new, right? So the idea, or the thing is, maybe I have to talk a little bit more first. Each test case itself is parallelized, but each test after test is in sequence. But if you have, for example, a test who tests, let's say, BGP neighbor count, and the next test tests BGP specific details, we would run this parallel on all the boxes, but in sequence. So if it's the same show command sending to the box by Napalm, for example, we cache it for the test run, but not for the next test, because otherwise we would not detect any change, right? But maybe Marco can tell more about when he was doing his stack, he had some performance issues in the beginning, right?
Yeah. So what I was trying to do was testing about, I think it was 60 devices. I did spine leaf and tested some BGP attributes. And it used to work really good with like 3 spine, 4 leaves. Very well. No problems. But as you go, you have more BGP sessions and everything, so you start to get into some trouble. And what I was trying to do is I check all the neighbors, and of course, one neighbor and the other probably uses the same show command. It's a different line. So instead of running it like 60 or 100 times, I just run it once, and you can parse it multiple times and just get the information you need, which is way easier than. Also in the background, it would probably open 2 SSH sessions or 2 API calls. So you can also like optimize that really well, since you get the performance benefit of it and not DDoSing your own device. You can just parse it multiple times, which takes a little bit of CPU.
And there's one thing we have lots of these days is lots of CPU. RAM is expensive though. So we've covered who it's for. We've talked a little bit about what's going on under the hood. We know what nuts is. We've heard a couple of war stories. It's always fun to learn about the war stories. So, like the main conclusion is like your success with nuts is going to depend on what devices you are running. Like if you are running some really weird stuff that's not part of the big five vendors, you're going to have a worse time, right?
It depends, right? So if you have a nice API, it's not difficult. If you have, how can I say, if you have a shitty vendor, you have to expect a hard time. So be careful what kind of boxes you let into your network. But I would not say that it's the issue with nuts, that's the issue with automation. We choose Napalm because of the 5 big vendors, or not 5 vendors, but 5 big platforms. And the community driver. One big thing maybe to mention is that Napalm makes us the abstraction, right? So it gives us the data from vendor A and vendor B in the same format, so we don't have to do all this abstraction stuff. If you write your own test implementations for, let's say, Aruba, just to say a vendor, of course you have to hopefully structure data, otherwise you have to screenscape and you have to make the assertion. Yeah. But
which is miserable, and you don't want to really do that.
Yes.
Especially when you're the project maintainer, you really don't want to do it. But if you have like an environment where you only have like these 3 devices, it's not as much of a big deal, but then you're just doing it for yourself and not trying to supply enterprise grade software for free on the internet, which is harder. So we like to reuse those building blocks. Now, some of the proprietary stuff, and like what are the alternatives, like, and the limitations on those? I mean, pyATS from Cisco, right? Cisco only, right? Pretty basic.
I think they have some other vendor support, but definitely tested on in the Cisco world. I think I like the project, but of course I'm definitely biased. I like my nuts much more. The thing is, it is a huge package, it has a huge dependency, and it's a new ecosystem. You have your test bed, you cannot reuse other test beds from Nornir, for example. There was once an idea that we maybe integrate pyATS into nuts, but it was never a real use there. So, but definitely, especially if you want to have snapshots, pyATS is great because it can make hundreds of shell commands. You can upgrade your box and you can make the diff. So this snapshot diff is a nice feature, but I also had some issues that there are too many changes. So
like there was a real need for this. Another one that comes to mind is the ONDATRA folks. So the Open Network Device Automated Test Runner and API, that's quite a mouthful. I prefer nuts in my mouth. Okay, I'm sorry. Anyway, ONDATRA, that's another project with a total of 60 stars. Well, you're rocking those 116 GitHub stars, and as we know, there are like 5 people in the world who are actually running tests on their network, and the listener's going to be number 6. So we have the ONDATRA. That's another approach to it. You have the BATFISH stuff, of course. Was there any reason why you weren't able to use just BATFISH or
BATFISH? The concept behind is more like offline testing, right? So you provide running configs and you make evaluations. You check if you have BGPs configured on both sides, if the OSPF neighborship would come up if you make the change. So this is a great tool for pre-deployment checks, validity checks of your configurations.
So static analysis type stuff versus, you're actually reaching out to see what's going on and if you're hitting that software bug. And that's kind of the main difference between static analysis and pulling stuff from live network equipment. Yes, you are not doing knock on hello on the box every time or caching the data, but you are also going to hit the bugs. You're going to see what's really happening, if the links have been cut, that sort of thing. Your config's not going to tell you the link's been cut. So, tell your manager that when he wants you. Just use BATFISH. Then we of course have our friend Susie Q, Dinesh. He has some. He's more of an. Is he more of an observability play? Like, how would you rank? Like, I know that we can do some things, like with the free version of Susie Q. He does the knock knock. He does multi vendor. He presents it in a standardized format that you can query your network, make sure that the OSPF counts are, etc. Of course, it is a heavier stack than what you guys are running. Like, you guys are way more portable, I would say, because of it's pip install, a couple of YAML files, that's it. There's no server running, there's no underlying infrastructure. Anything else to add to that comparison?
Yeah, I think we can run on your CI/CD pipeline. We can run on your Raspberry Pi. We can use your Raspberry Pi for probes, or we can use the Docker container on your vendor box. I think Suzy Q is an interesting tool, especially for visibility, for discovery. One use case always is checking the MTU. Is the MTU on all the interfaces what you expect, right? So I think under the hood you have this Panda. So if you're familiar with Panda and data engineering, Suzy Q is definitely nice to use because you can make queries, you can make graphs, you can plot stuff afterwards with the data you get out of it. But I have to be honest, I did not play so much with the Suzy Q than I play with Nuts.
We will correct that before we meet Dinesh next time in Prague. We don't want to get beaten up in the parking lot. So what else do we have? We have the NAT picker stuff. That's been kind of it's a proprietary solution, of course. So you get what you pay for, right? Nuts is of course free. You can play with Us's Nuts, absolutely free. But NAT picker under the hood, I believe they're also using Nornir, or at least some of the direct connect ecosystem. The Napalm, the NetPick, whatever they're using. Like, have you had a chance to take a look at the NetPicker, guys?
I was at the booth last time. I was talking with them because they're also using pyTest under the hood. I think the big benefit I see there is the collection of tests they have. Right, they have a lot of security vulnerability checks. They have a lot of defined tests, and you can write your own tests with some, I think, text FSM or TTP parsing. Not sure, but yeah, definitely another great tool.
Like, we're spoiled in this ecosystem today. So the proprietary options to look at in this space. I mean, yeah, you get the Cisco pyATS, you got the ANATA Arista Network Test Automation framework, which of course Arista only. So this is like Nuts is a multi-vendor play. It's free. You don't maybe get as much free out of the box security stuff, but you do get that whole pre and post checking with the LLTP neighbors and anything that you can really parse out, and of course whatever you can create on your own on top to solve your use case. And of course we highly encourage you to share whatever it. How would people go about, like, let's say that somebody wrote something that wanted to share it with the community, like how would that person go about sharing their FortiGate version checker or something like that?
I mean, that's the neat thing about open source. Our dear listeners can do pull requests, and we'll accept them if they're up to our standards. You can do whatever your mind can imagine. We also have some custom test repository where we can do some that are more specific, and we can share them through that. So that is very nice. Like, if you can imagine every weird box, if everybody writes their tests, we just need to do it once and we can use them all. We can all have this weird box next year. So just go ahead, have the courage, do the pull request, and we'll be happy about it.
Yeah, there you go. So don't go download NetPicker and steal all their tests and put them in an LLM to translate them over and then dumping them into this repo, which is something I'm sure some of the LLM kids are thinking about right now. Oh, I'll just prompt ChatGPT to make me a test and it'll be up to snuff. So you're gonna want to do a good job on this one. You're gonna want to test it. Something that comes up a lot is, of course, we do have the beautiful Container Lab now. So that does make, CI/CD testing a possibility for these types of projects where you can actually have Container Lab spin up during the when somebody merges to main or production. Like you can actually have a set of tests that run. Hey, this is actually working on the the SR Linux or whatever box. Or if we have a private repo, you can move in some of those proprietary images that you got from that shady website. I'm, of course, a Cisco certified gold partner, so I just get my images the normal way. But for our unfortunates out there, again, shout out to Nokia for opening up the image on the container image, because having to go every time there's an update, and I got to go drudging through the vendor website. I got to log in. I got to log in through the main login because my user is authenticated, but it doesn't have access to that particular image. Go in there, download it, put it in the repo, load it up into Docker. It's a mess. It's extra steps that nobody needs, and we do not know why. I think it's legal, and I'm calling out Cisco. I'm calling out. I think 40 has an image, but it's basically Cisco, Juniper, all the big vendors except for our dear beloved Nokia. So the Finns get a big shout out because we can actually test on their stuff, and that there's a reason why you're seeing the SR Linux from Nokia and all those all the training and all this stuff. It's because it's one click away. We don't like 5 clicks. Nobody likes 5 clicks. I had to download like a vendor Python SDK the other day, which comes as a WHL, so a wheel file, and I have to, every time it's an update, I gotta go sign in, download the wheel file, put it in there, completely breaks the rest of my my Python package management, because I'm just dragging and dropping like it's 1998, and that's not cool. I'm not even going to mention the vendor because they said they'd fix it, so I'm going to give them a couple of months. But if it's not, we're going to war. You know who you are. You know what you did. But people hate this kind of stuff, and it should be easier. And to anyone who's out listening in the car going like, "Oh, Steiny, you're complaining about the like stuff like this adds up, right?" And it creates tension, and it creates unneeded workloads when you can just pull the Nokia image and you're done. So, like, if we wanted to test this automatically on, XRD for the iOS XR Cisco stuff, or CRD, whatever the Juniper image is called, which I forget, CRDD or something. If we wanted to test on that, we would have to have the repo private and have the test run in like a private repo, because we're not allowed to expose that image to the internet, because now we're distributing, copyrighted software. Total pain, and that means that we can't test nuts, for example, automatically to make sure that everything's working like the pings are working and all this stuff. But imagine a world where we can fire up 5 vendors and just have them run in Container Lab, no questions asked, make sure the ping is working, make sure the LLDP checks are working, make sure that everything's fine. And, you get that green check mark every single time we make changes to the main code base. My God, it's a beautiful world, and we can do it, but we have to do it in private. And that's not cool. Nuts should be shared. So this kind of covers most of the stuff that we wanted to cover in this episode. And, of course, we've already plugged Autocon. And, again, listener, join us in Prague. Me and Urs will be there, talking about nuts and... The resources, of course, will be available after the conference, but highly recommend for you to get there in person, because that's where you can ask your questions. And it's not really the courses or anything; it's the hallway conversations at Autocon. That's where you get so much free consultation. I've saved so much money just by getting the Network to Code guys drunk and just being like, "Oh, you do that, and then what would you do then? Okay, cool. Ha 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 ha! I saved $200,000, suckers!" Because you have access to really smart people who've had 2 or 3 beers, and they tell you all the secrets. And that's the hallway. You're going to want the hallway. Also, remember to stay at the hotel, the conference hotel, because there's a discount link on that. It helps out the Autocon runners to get the rooms and the stuff and all this stuff. Like, this stuff is expensive. Like, you might call them shills for having sponsors. No, they're not. Like, the beer party, we do not want to be having Autocon for in somebody's basement, okay? I personally enjoy having access to refreshments that were prepared in a kitchen and not in the back of someone's truck, although I do like a nice cold sandwich as much as the next guy. So stay at the hotel, I'll see you in the hallway. Me and Urs will give you, you get what you pay for with when you get free consulting from me. It depends on what mood I'm in and if I've taken my medicine that day. So the question is, we have AutoCon coming up, Prague, very excited, lots of nuts to show. So we're going to have Dinesh from Suzy Q is going to be there. Everyone who has a framework in the network automation landscape roadmap, which we'll link to in the show notes. But by the way, when this show happens, like when I'm looking for the competitors and when I want to, ask the guest, I just go to the network automation landscape and then I just ask him about pyATS and everything that's related to it. And then the guest can answer, oh, yes, we love that project, but it didn't do XYZ, or it cost too much money, or it didn't cost enough money, which is sometimes also a problem. I'll take all your free money, no worries. Now, we have a lot of resources that are going to be in the show notes, links to the talks that these gentlemen have given about, integrating with Infrahub and nuts and all that good stuff. And again, you can integrate with Netbox. We don't discriminate against sources of truth on this show, so long as you're not doing an Excel sheet. And again, I'll let you do the Excel sheet. I'm not gonna make fun of you. I mean, what is YAML except an Excel sheet? But it's vertical or horizontal. Like it's at the end of the day, it's static data. It's all good. We're all friends. Now, here comes the part of the show that everyone has been waiting for. Marco, controversial opinion time. What you got for us?
Controversial opinion?
Yeah.
I'm not going to make friends with that, but I'm going to call some people out.
Everybody
that pretends that they tested their network when it doesn't work the next day, they probably didn't do a good enough job.
Oh, shit. Wow. That's not really a controversial opinion. Ladies and gentlemen, sound off in the comment section if we let our guests get away too easily with a I think everyone should do their jobs well. It's not a controversial opinion. Now, do you have a deep, dark secret? Do you have some software that you use? Do you prompt everything before you typed it? Are you running GitHub Copilot full time? Well, tell us. We're friends. No one will hear this. It's good.
Maybe a little bit of a controversial opinion is that I never use the graphical UI to use my Explorer or my Finder. I always do it out of the terminal. So maybe that's controversial enough for you.
That's just you being a badass, guy. That's just you being a badass. Urs, we gotta work on these controversial opinions before the show. It should be like, I hate cats because XYZ. We're not gonna get any viewer engagement or listener engagement on this, but I'll accept it anyway. So remember, you're gonna get called out for not testing your network. Pre and post, as we talked about in the show, having pre-checks and post-checks really puts you apart from the standard network engineer and the network automation practitioner. You're going to be the next level guy, gal, person, they, them, doesn't matter. You're going to be next level as soon as you got those tests running because, and again, you're not going to remember to test everything, right? Things will still, you're still going to screw up. That helper address, you might not have tested that particular IP DHCP helper address, and that's okay. But the fact that you put in a lot of tests and, again, those time-delayed things like DHCP or DNS, that resolution time, it's stuff that happens after the change window is usually where they get you. And, getting a DHCP client running in the network. Now, I'll share with the listener I'll give him my controversial thing. I love on my Cisco or Juniper or whatever switches, if I don't have a management plane in that network that I'm testing, I sometimes put on a DHCP based interface on the switch and have it grab an IP address like it's a client, and that way I know that the DHCP is running and everything, the helper and all that, and then I just rip it down and I do it using automation. So you can do some freaky stuff actually with configuration and testing, and then run your PyTest, and that way you have a little fake client that you got on that particular VLAN. You managed to get a DNS resolution. You managed to get a ping working. You can check if you have internet access or if you don't have internet access, and sometimes checking, again, not from my real life experience, but making sure that things are reachable from the internet, and also making sure that things are not reachable from the internet are just as important. Brings us to our sponsor of the show, Nothing. Nothing is what we bring to you today. Thank you. So, listener, thank you for joining us for this particular instance. We've shilled everything that we were going to shill today. We're very excited for AutoCon. Can't wait to see you there. Network Automation Forum, great place to reach me and Urs and anyone you want to talk to. So join the Slack channel. Our new website. We have a new website, Network Automation, networkautomagic.net, because the other stuff was taken. So we had to do bad English. And that's why we have this name of the show. So again, listener, go try Nuts. If you haven't been playing with Container Lab, you should be playing with Container Lab. Play with it in code spaces. It's very handy. Users will at the when we are teaching at the event on Monday, Urs, it's going to be with code spaces from GitHub, free resources. You got the Container Lab. You're going to have all the things we talked about and more. It's going to be the best. It's going to be the best course ever, right, Urs?
Definitely.
No
doubt.
He wouldn't lie to you to bring you halfway across the globe to Prague just to not give you the best course in the world. We're going to have a great time there. Anything else, Marco, you want to plug to the listener?
The course is definitely going to be nuts. I can see it. I'm very happy to get the feedback from there, so just hit me up with it.
Hit him up, ladies and gentlemen. So, I think we did a really good job not doing all the nuts jokes that we got them out of we had a pre-call a few minutes. We did all those nuts jokes. Yep. And again, I think we're going to have to flag this episode as like not for kids or something. If you were listening in the car with your kids, I think we did a really good job compared to the things we could have said and we said before we started recording. So I just want to say good job to us. We're not packet pushers, okay? We're not that clean. We're not professionals. We don't do this for a living, but I think I'm just so proud of us, because I was playing with Urs's nuts last night is a sentence that I can say, and honestly, because I was playing with Urs's nuts last night, and he helped me do it though. He helped me play with his nuts, and we just lost. Oh man, we jumped the shark. We did the thing. I'm so sorry. So listener, thank you for joining us. We'll be back next month with another exciting episode because we release monthly. Go check out networkautomagic.net for the show notes. There'll be links there. They'll also be in your podcast app of choice, so you'll be able to actually go watch the Nog Talk and all that good stuff that these boys have been up to. So again, Marco, thank you for joining us. We look forward to having you on the show. I think we'll have to come and check back in on you and see the status of your nuts.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
We were about to close up, and we had a lot of jokes, and you're still listening at the end, so, I don't know what's wrong with you, dear listener, but testing 101, like, when we're talking about testing, we're talking about, integration tests, unit tests, like software engineering terminology 101, and the main difference is, of course, that, PyTest lends itself very well to unit tests and integration tests. So the difference between maybe if we take the software engineering terminology of a unit test, that would be making sure that that OSPF is running on router 1, right? That's at one unit test, OSPF is running, great. An integration test is that the neighborship is actually running. So the both are running the thing, running OSPF, both have their OSPF neighbor hash passwords configured correctly, and they're exchanging routes. So that would be almost an integration test. And as soon as you maybe are doing a redistribution, that's also an end-to-end integration test. So I've noticed that people, we start throwing around a lot of software terminology these days. And it's very important to clarify because I had this coworker who thought that MVP meant most valuable player and not minimum viable product. And I've always had that thought in the back of my head, like, hey, if you're listening to this, please sound off in the comments if we're, using too many buzzwords or whatever. Like, if you have no idea what a unit test is or what PyTest is, it's kind of hard to see the value. So, when we're communicating to stakeholders, be it managers or other network engineers or software people that are maybe, hybrid and coming into network engineering, it's always important to clarify these terms because you can't expect everyone to know everything and, trying to get that end-to-end value statement. So, Marco, would you like, are you happy with that definition? Like, the difference between a unit network test and a integration network test?
Yeah, I think that was a very well explained definition. Although in network is not as easy as in software. In software, it's very clearly defined what a unit is and what the system test is. In network, the boundaries are kind of fluid, and that is kind of our job to see multiple angles. So a unit test, don't hang us up on the definition, is it can be multiple things. Like, of course, in network, everything is interconnected and is communicating. Yeah. So also the network unit testing system, as in nuts, it also does system tests and integration tests.
Exactly. And I mean, like, you might be wondering right now, like, why would have done 10 years ago? Like, if I configured OSPF is running. That's what you assume, right? And that's what the word assertion is for. You're asserting, and that's why those PyTests always have that assert XYZ. Assert that OSPF is running. You're going to hit that bug on that OS that you're installing or upgrading. You're going to have something happen, and it's not going to happen inside of your little bubble. It's going to happen outside of your bubble or underneath your bubble. When I say underneath, I mean the software version you upgraded to has a bug. When I say outside your bubble, I mean the ISP that you're peering with is having issues or changed the hash password on the peering link. And you're also testing things that aren't communicating or have a always green is up, like making sure that the user accounts exist, that there is a static, hey, if the AAA authentication server is offline, that we have a correctly configured management account that is then activated and you're able to use when the lights go off and we lose global internet. So that's also a thing that you're not going to see a green light on that user existing, and that's a great single unit of testing, making sure that I have my I have my DNS configured, I have this user, I have XYZ part of my environment, I have my IPSLA. If you're doing like continuous ping from the box and then you're reporting via monitoring that you're doing those pings, then those are being collected by your SNMP poller, your monitoring stack. Your monitoring stack and testing stack, they do have some overlap, but there are clear and decisive differences between those two things, right? So an example of which was like the is the neighbor up versus the is the device up down. Like in the monitoring case, your device is up down. Okay, great. In the testing case, you expect the device to be down because you're doing the upgrade, and then you're expecting the device to be up and having XYZ services or assertions that you made. You asserted that the box has XYZ. And that way you can be confident that you are doing a good testing methodology, like that you expected. Versus the monitoring scenario, it's really hard to use the monitoring system to do those particular tests. Now, you could test afterwards from the monitoring system. Hey, I see the OSPF process running. I see the neighborship. I see routes in the table in some cases. You could do that from the monitoring system, but you get so much more power, flexibility, and capability by doing it in the testing, like in the change scenario, because you don't have to be continually probing that monitoring system, because otherwise you're going to have like 10 million tests to write. And actually, that brings up a good point that we forgot to mention, is that rewriting tests or reworking tests is very brittle and painful, right, Marco? Like if I've written out 7,000 tests, like this pings here, this pings there, and I'm not using an inventory system or a network source of truth like Napbox, it's going to be very brittle. It's like the joke where you break your unit tests in software engineering. You just delete the test instead of reworking it. So any pointers when it comes to testing methodology, like not making brittle tests?
Yeah. I guess at some points it's just a house of cards. You change something, you change the IP prefix of everything, and you can basically throw away your tests. So I would try to automate as much as you can. Just get some automated test definitions going, and maybe test a little less, but do it consistently, and make sure if you change something, you don't start over again. Because what we're trying to do is just automate things and have a good baseline of testing. It doesn't I can hire somebody to write tests all day, and he will never be done when I change the network all the time. So just make the machine work for you.
And like one of the ways to get around that is not writing the static IP. It's to actually write against an inventory system like Netbox or Infrahub. And if you keep your source of truth consistent, so you're updating your Notabot or whatever with the IP address of the loopback or whatever, you're always pointing your test that you're writing towards your network source of truth, and that's where you're getting the loopback. That means that your test is going to be less brittle, and when you add another router, you're going to be able to reuse that test. We should Urs, is that something we can teach folks about in the course, like, reusability? That's what you're going to do with Infrahub or in your stack, right?
That's definitely something we should teach, yeah. And another point we did not cover is reporting. If you have management and they want to have reports, that's the next episode maybe.
Reporting. Management loves graphs. You're gonna be running pandas. You're gonna be making little graphs and crap like that. You're gonna be a rock star. Okay, you just gotta come hang out with us in Prague, buy us lots of beers, and we'll tell you everything. We'll give you the code. It's gonna be great. Okay, it's gonna be great. Thank you so much. And again, we're gonna try to have all the follow-up information we can in the show notes, but there's always gonna be something we forget to mention and that we overlap. But we decided to hit record again because we value you, dear listener. And remember, oh wait, this is the part where we try to sell our shirts or something, Urs. Like, do we open up a shirt store? Like, we're not packet pushers. We're not trying to sell a coffee mug every show, right?
I think you have to earn the shirt.
I think you have to earn the shirt. Like, we don't sell those. You earn the shirt. We give you that shirt. And Marco's definitely getting a shirt for this episode. So, in conclusion, I'd like to thank you so much for listening, and we can't wait to see you next month. Bye.